Well, here we are. We've made it all the way to the final weekend of Split 2. This is, of course, the ALGS Pro League for APAC South. And I'm back once again, Gino. I don't know if that's good or bad, but hopefully the teams are going to be back. Hopefully they're going to be ready to go because this is a very important weekend. There are still so many opportunities for those teams to make it to the top 5, which is, of course, 5 teams that will represent our region going over to the Split 2 playoffs. I'm super keen to get stuck into this one, and I think this weekend is going to be a banger.
Yeah, we can say it now. It's going to be Stockholm, right? We have announced where the LAN is going to be for Split 2 of ALGS. Oh, man, so looking forward to it, and so looking forward to sending 5 teams over there from APAC South who are honestly just going to tear apart the competition. I can feel it in my bones already.
Yeah, we shall wait and see. We shall wait and see. Obviously, you know, jury's out, I guess, as to which 5 teams that is going to be, though. There are probably one, or is there 1 or 2, or is there just 1 right now, which we've probably felt like we've already locked in, or do you want to go further down the list at the moment?
We've been talking about that tier list the whole way through the season, right? It feels like there's definitely a number 1 and a number 2 separated by a little bit. Look, mathematically, no one's
100%.
No one's
safe.
there all the way, Elfish. There's a chance, who knows how far down the leaderboard someone could jump up and grab one of those tickets from. And yes, absolutely. The 2 at the top looking pretty good. But
I mean, like the question, though, obviously is like, okay, Reignite, they're out on their own, but are we prepared to say maybe someone else is kind of already safe? I think looking at it right now, maybe not. We'll talk about that in just a second, though. We can take a quick look back at how things have actually gone over the last couple of weekends and show you, pretty much that you're seeing the likes of Reignite pop their faces up quite a lot of times when it comes to getting that dub, and usually when they don't, they're at least in the top 3, so they've been doing really, really well for themselves. Nice to see Stinky B sort of chiming in here and there as well, and they're definitely a team that will be on the tips of our lips over the next couple of days because they're fighting for one of those top 5 spots. I mean, across the board, your usual suspects generally have performed over the last 2 weekends, and it's quite nice to see.
yeah, I mean, just looking at across the the range of teams we've got here who've taken out a podium finish so far in this split. You've got a team like EXO down there. They've taken 1/3, but they are probably the team who has fallen the most since Split 1, with replacing Chambers with Ziki. Feels like the one roster change that really hasn't worked out so far this split. And then you look at a lot of the other teams there who have made those roster changes successfully. Reignite, Sudraiku, we've got Burger there as well. All of those teams have really leveled up in as well as bringing a new member on board, and how quickly they did that, considering it was essentially they did this after the split was meant to have started, essentially, right?
Yeah, it was a bit weird.
Interesting timing, but yeah, it's worked out well for them.
Yeah. Anyway, one other thing that we do have to touch on is the prize pool, and that's obviously in addition to the 5 slots that do send these teams over to the Split 2 playoffs. So 15 grand, 15,000 spending dollars to take over to playoffs with you. Doesn't sound too bad. You could probably throw a couple of hotel parties, have a good time. Take everyone out for dinner. I'm not sure if that's what I would be using my $15,000 on.
I wonder if there's any K barbecues in Stockholm, because I feel like that's
I'm sure there would be.
If you're in esports and you're having like a sort of dinner party, it feels like it almost has to be at K barbecue.
You can't go anywhere without a K barbecue these days.
It's just the done thing in esports. Frankly,
I've had it in a few countries actually. It's
worldwide.
You need to have that like barometer, right? You have to figure out which country is like higher on the K barbecue tier list. And I think actually Australia is kind of up there. Anyway, we should take a look at the standings as well heading into this weekend, because this is where I guess the meat and potatoes of the discussion is going to be surrounded. Now down toward the bottom 20, maybe not so much. You do have a lot of teams here that I would say are probably out of contention. I mean, it's almost impossible for, if you're in that bottom 30, for you to actually take a top 5 spot.
Yeah.
Mathematically, right now, you would have to hope that like Dreamfire and Free Agent had basically 2 0-point days, and everyone else pretty
Basically,
much did
they're
the
just
same.
looking to try and get into the money, right? I mean,
Correct.
our bottom 4 teams here from SMC downwards, they are like literally out. They are no longer playing in Pro League. So it's the 36 teams for above there. But yeah, as you say, even up to honestly like 20th spot there with like Emmanuel. I mean, yeah, sure, those guys are, they're close to the money, and they'd definitely be looking to have some better days across our last weekend. But then as you move up to the top, you're seeing the teams that are actually in contention to walk away with that plane ticket in their hands. So honestly, for me, it feels like it's from 10th spot upwards. So Ath inside the ring, they've had some big days. Even Lightning Unicorn and Ant, sure, but they're a little off the pace, right? I mean, it's only like 15 points at the moment.
Yeah.
But they would have to have a phenomenal day and have the other teams that are fighting for those positions do not very well at all to move that far up the leaderboard.
I tend to agree with you. I think I'm probably happy to give down to maybe Lightning Unicorn one more day. If they get a win, today, then look, I think coming into tomorrow we can perhaps still keep that team in discussion. But as you say, EXO up seems to probably be the teams to beat. And it is a good point about EXO that you made a little bit earlier. They really have dropped off in terms of their output from previous iterations of that roster and previous tournaments that we've watched here in APAC South. So I think for me right now, EXO, they are still in the mix, but they're going to need to step things up. So I guess maybe this next graphic that we have is perhaps a good representation of that, Gina, and we can show you guys exactly how things are shaping up from the regional side of things. And EXO is still at the top of the bunch for Thailand, but they're not quite up there with some of the other regions, like ANZ in particular. Yeah,
so we put this together to just really showcase how diverse APAC South is. It's such a massive region, right? And as you can see, we've got teams from Australia all the way down to India. So this graphic is showing us the best team from each region as it stands on the scoreboard right now, the overall split standing. So ANZ doing fantastically. They've taken out the top 3 spots there, which you can see, the next team down is China, or is Dreamfire, obviously the Chinese team, in 4th. And then, continuing on from there, we've got just so much representation. I mean, it's awesome to see. We've got full teams from Indonesia and Taiwan and Thailand and Singapore, Malaysia, and India. Like, it's fantastic to have that much representation and diversity in APAC South.
I even saw there was a player from the Philippines as well.
Dodge.
So
I think it is. Plays for DML.
Yeah, so, even not represented on that list there because it's not a whole region, but or a whole team of Philippines players, but you still have representation from that region as well. So that's all really cool to have so many teams and players. And to be fair, we've got a lot of them really contesting in that top 5. I think obviously outside of the ANZ region, it is quite a spread. Obviously ANZ kind of seems to be dominating, which is not something that I'm necessarily used to when it comes to esports. Apex Legends, I feel like, is a little bit of a different one. It's a bit of a curveball, right? Where for some reason the ANZ teams always seem to perform very well in Apex South.
We've been doing very well for a very long time, actually. It was the original EXO roster was an ANZ, a full ANZ team that killed it for a very long time. Then there was, EXO as a like an organization have actually done well across several rosters, and now they're looking at the Thai roster they've got. They've done, they've had periods of dominance, as we've just said. They've dropped off a little bit, but at the moment it really does seem to be that. But then again, we had Dreamfire take out the playoffs at the end of Split 1, right? So there's absolutely some jockeying for position, and look, I just hope viewers from all over the region that were, maybe just wondering if their country was represented, or if there's players from their region playing, that might give you an idea of who's at the top of the ticket for your region, and you can, have someone to follow along.
What I like about it is that there is a team from pretty much every region in the top 10 that makes it interesting. But you can't necessarily say the same thing for the legend picks over the course of this event. They have been very top-heavy, right? We've seen a lot of Jibby, we've seen a lot of Valk, and they're pretty much running away with things. So not too much variety out from at least the core 2 of any given composition.
So this is across both World's Edge and Storm Point. So obviously we do see some differences between them, but Valk and Gibby are approaching 100%. They're both, I think it was like maybe 94 and 97% or something like that overall in the tournament for APAC South. You can see both maps, doesn't matter. Almost always you've got those two, and then you just have something to build out your composition, right? So you've got there's a little bit more Ash when you're looking at Storm, Point, Caustic there at 238 actually is pretty big considering he's almost only seen on World's Edge, and then you've got the specialist going down from there. So seeing Watson with 27 picks. I mean, I don't know how many games Saviour's played so far, but that's the majority of them, coming from one player there.
Well, he would have played 4 days worth of 6 games, so 24.
Yep.
And then, maybe
there
2 or 3 other
more,
players have picked up the Watson here and there, but I'd say the vast majority might be him. Although, is he picking it every single time? We're not tracking that, or we could, theoretically, but I haven't. One other thing that I think we do need to touch on here as well is our top 2 teams coming into today. Obviously, both from the ANZ region. We've sort of brought that up a few times. And one of them is not super surprising. I think Reignite, we definitely expect to be at the top of the pack, but Sutaraiku in particular, for me, have very much consistency and very much so on just been fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, this is it's a really cool comparison here, right? Because we're seeing that Straiku are actually the most successful team in terms of their average placement on any team in APAC South over any map. So 3.25 is as good as it gets. Reignite, they're the #1 team on World's Edge. But as you can see here, both teams almost the opposite of each other. And I think this speaks a lot to their play style, right? We had a little bit of chat about, why this might be. And I think one of the big reasons is because Straiku are playing that sort of, the crafting, the edge kind of gameplay, and having access to the Trident, because they're landing at Mill, they get guaranteed a Trident every single game. Allows them a lot more flexibility. They can get to those crafters a lot faster. You're not necessarily having to, just take a balloon or a Valcolt everywhere you need to go. You can zoom around on that. And I think that actually helps their playstyle out a bit and is one of the reasons why they've done so well on Storm Point compared to a lot of these other top teams.
I wonder if the fact that they also sort of seem to have an Ash specialist is another factor in that one. I know that's obviously something that Bullet likes to go on to, even on World's Edge, but it's been a legend that's been picked up sort of semi across the board, a little bit more so on Storm Point. Maybe something to be said there as well. Obviously, we do need to touch on the Beacon as well before we jump into today's game. So we want to have a bit of a look at maybe where this lobby is shaping up, what we're going to be seeing from I believe it's going to be 17 teams that are playing in this lobby in particular. So a few, again, just not quite being able to make it today. We'll start off on World's Edge this time around. As you guys, to be fair, that's not an easy team to go up against.
Yeah, I just, considering it's Antenna and you got some other places, Cascade Falls, I mean, NXL Wolfpack, they've, I'm calling this Ski Lift, by the way. I've come up with a new name
Ski
for it.
Lift. Okay.
Yeah, well,
it does look a bit like
they
Ski
kept
Lift.
calling it like, no name, but you've got that awesome big zip line between the two houses there. So that's where NXL have been landing, and then actually going over here sometimes if there's a beacon there as well. So I wouldn't be, honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if someone landed around there and Cascade Falls as well. You have those options.
I will say I'm a much bigger fan of Ski Lift than No Name as a call out. I don't think No Name's, you could call literally anywhere on the map No Name as long as it doesn't have a name. So how does that really describe anything? At least
exactly. That's why I'm calling it. I'm calling it right now. We're going with Ski Lift.
We're gonna start a wave. This is gonna be. It's going to start in APAC South, and everyone's going to start calling it Ski Lift afterwards. Anyway, I think we're not too far away from getting into game number 1 here, Genome. So get excited, because this is now the final weekend of ALGS Pro League Split 2, and there are a few games that we do have to check out to see how it's all going to pan out. It is, of course, the start of 12 games remaining for all of these teams, and they're going to be 12 very important matches as well. Every single point is going to be a big difference maker, particularly if you're sitting in one of those 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 kind of positions.
Absolutely. I mean, look, apart from the couple of, your Reignite, your Straiku, maybe even Burger, who've been trying to run away with things, from there down, it is so close. And, probably shout out to the admin team for coming up with a new scoring system this season, which I think has actually contributed to it being a little bit more exciting coming into this end of the season because, yeah, we're just seeing such a good spread or such a tight-knit spread in that top region that means we're going to have an absolute banger of a last weekend here as we work out who's making the big trip to Stockholm.
Yeah, so 17 teams only in this lobby, which, it's not something that's been particularly unusual so far this season in APAC South. But the reason I mention that is because, you're getting guaranteed points out of placements and such. So for Reignite, for example, who are out far ahead, it doesn't become necessarily a question now. I think there's some teams that are like sort of 20 points behind, 15 points behind, whatever. It's not even really necessarily that you're like 15 or 20 points behind, but the actual deficit, in a worst case scenario for Reignite is a little bit more than that actually, because they do get some free points out of it, given the fact that there are some teams missing. So there's that to think about as well when you're sort of doing the mental arithmetic and calculations. It's probably not something that's on the minds of the players today. I feel like today you kind of go in and you just think, we got to do what we got to do. We sort of just try and do our best. Let's not focus on what the other teams are. Let's not focus on the deficit. Tomorrow, though, you probably do want to be thinking about, well, if we get this and they get that, what are we sort of considering is going to be a bit of a situation. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I guess it also depends on what kind of people you are, what kind of players you have on your team. Are you kind of nerds that you want to really know exactly what's happening all the time, or are you just sort of playing by feel and hoping for the best?
Well, the other thing to consider, Elfish, as well, is that going into tomorrow, both of the groups play at the same time. So, to avoid any shenanigans of teams trying to, sort of impact the how others might be placing or anything like that, everyone plays at the same time, and we kind of just see it shake out through the day. So we will be starting tomorrow a little bit later. If you're used to turning up at 3 p.m. Australian time or whatever it is where you are at the moment, it'll be 4 hours later tomorrow.